Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. I hope you're all having a great day. We've got a very special guest to talk about a very important issue on today's episode. The prospects of war on Venezuela, and possibly, I think we're going to touch on this, maybe also Colombia. And we see some heightened escalatory talk and behavior against even Nicaragua now. So we're going to be breaking all of this down with Diego Sequera, who is in Venezuela, I believe, right now. He is a journalist, writer, translator, and political analyst. He's the co-founder of Mission Verdad. He focuses, obviously, on geopolitics, in particular, what is going on in Latin America. So, Diego, thank you so much for joining me again, not under the best circumstances. If you could, just give me the frame of mind of the Venezuelan people right now. What's the vibe like in Venezuela? How are people adjusting to this?
Hey, Jackson, thank you for having me one more time. Yeah, well, it's kind of weird. I mean, like I said, we're pretty much used to tracing moments of pressure and expectations, either one direction or the other, and you can see that in the streets. People are basically about their own business. I work in a very bustling area of Caracas, a very dynamic one, and people are just doing their stuff. I mean, it is part of the conversation, but I don't think people are taking it as seriously yet as we could expect. Although it is part of the conversation, and there's also mixed feelings about this. You can find a small camp of people that are perhaps too enthusiastic about the possibilities, and with that dumbass gamer mindset, thinking that it's just going to be, some swift thing and everything will be wonderful a couple of days afterwards. But most of the people actually, when they talk about it, they feel quite uncomfortable. And a lot of polls also show how they do not agree with this as a quote unquote solution to the Venezuelan situation.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, in Americans, I saw the most recent polls, over 65% oppose a war on Venezuela. And let's touch on what that would look like the day after. We can talk about the other stuff, the logistics of what's happening right now in a moment. But there's this lunatic idea that everything, as you just said, would be smooth sailing if, a decapitation strike were to happen on Venezuela, strikes were taking place. But when I think about it, you've got most of the country that supports President Maduro, the overwhelming majority. You have the military that is fully in line with President Maduro. You have a people's militia, which is like 1 million strong, and most of these people are armed with guns. So if something really bad were to happen, it could very easily spiral into absolute chaos, violent chaos, very quickly. That'd be hard to put that genie back in the bottle. What do you think?
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, it depends on the hypothetical scenario we talk about. For example, in the case of now it seems more possible than before because they're like increasing the number of troops in southern Puerto Rico. In a hypothetical beachhead occupation or of any other kind would be really, really complicated for them, and I don't think it would be wise. That would be like the worst decision to make in that case. And of course, you know how that actually breaks down. It won't be different in any case of how these things react, especially if the military doctrine of Venezuela is basically based on asymmetrical warfare and also prolonged people's warfare as well. So in that sense, it won't be nice for anyone, especially for us, of course, because a lot of people like to, make these parallels, these comparisons with Vietnam. And yes, sure, it probably would be similar in the sense of people opposing and actively opposing an occupation, but the human cost of that is just insane. And in the case of airstrikes, for example, which is so far, I think it would be the closest, talking about hypotheticals here, one of the closest military options if you focus on the buildup that they're amassing still at the near our shores. And I think in that case it would be different. It would be much more similar to what we saw in Iran this year. I mean, people that maybe were just fed up about politics, bored, or didn't care much about things will have a different reaction, because you mentioned and you listed the obvious part, which is, you know, the support and the militias and all that. But these things also stoke a particular kind of nationalism that I don't think how much aware the U.S. is about this. Actually, it actually was shown even during the Guaido's years, when the U.S. put up the heat. More rejection came from more people, not necessarily Chavista supporters, stating that they wouldn't agree for the U.S. to take the business into their own hands and quote unquote solve it. So those two reactions are the most possible, and in any case, I think it will immediately backfire, and it will have also in a mid-long-term blowback elements to this, because of course it seems, Jackson, that it seems like they're widening the scope, like you just already mentioned.
It's crazy that we're even talking about this. Where do you think it went wrong for the Trump administration? I can't find a pinpoint, mark on the timeline. We had Rick Grenell visit Caracas at the start of the Trump administration, in effect recognizing President Maduro, something that Biden didn't do after the recent elections in 2024. You had Chevron that was doing business in Venezuela, albeit limited. They were given permits and whatnot, and they were doing limited business, and they advocated against a regime change war in Venezuela. At least that's what they publicly said. Where do you think it went wrong?
You know, if we recall the first conversation, I talked about a factor that I think still is the one that defines the situation. Because yes, there was this two different tracks regarding Venezuela. There was one, and I think it was actually Trump's favorite, which was Grenell, and the more pragmatic, more sort of win-win approach, regardless of optics, regardless of the narratives, regardless of the kind of concessions, be it de facto or de jure, they could have done. But then you had, of course, the other track, which is, of course, Rubio. And I think it all delves into that. I would imagine, for example, going all the way, as in military terms, or in a very aggressive format of regime change. I don't think Trump would mind if the outcome benefits him. But I still believe it's a Rubio thing. And if you widen the picture regarding what Rubio has been doing, how he has been maneuvering, you can see how he has basically sidelined most of Trump's envoys, not only in Venezuela. You can see also how Witkoff was basically also sidelined by Rubio and by Netanyahu, I might add. And that's something that's quite clear there. I mean, they allowed him to say some stuff. They allow him to be in some meetings and to say some boilerplate stuff that usually it's inconsequential. But what the factual things that we see, be it Gaza or be it Venezuela, are Rubio stuff. And I do believe it still overlaps with the kind of concerns and opportunities he conceives right now, as in concerns in the way that, yes, this taking a different turn, a closer one to Trump in a way, and I will explain that in a second, or a more delivering the exact thing, and also delivering to his own people and delivering to the southern crisis in that sense, which I think it's still on that track. And I think it has a lot to do with Rubio. I'm not bailing out Trump regarding Venezuela in this matter, but I know, for example, he's very close to Chevron. If I'm not mistaken, he's closer to Chevron than to Exxon. Chevron actually funded his inauguration. So I don't think he would have minded, regardless of the optics, to have like Joaquin Flores said at some point, some Roman friendship. I mean, I know he acknowledges, per the literature we've seen in Esper and Bolton and so forth, he acknowledged Maduro as a respectable strongman. These aren't the exact words, but and also calling Juan Guaido like the Beto O'Rourke of the Venezuelan opposition in that sense. So I do think he could have, if there's a beneficial mid point to this. I think he wouldn't mind. Also, you have, I mean, as it is, during this 8 weeks already, you've seen that that also moves a lot of money for the military-industrial complex. So it already makes a lot of people happy, regardless of the outcome. Although, of course, this is all speculation, but I think that's one of that's basically the case. And you can also see it, for example, with another extra component, his reactions, his kind of sore losing reactions regarding the Maria Corina Machado's Nobel Prize, and how humiliating has been for her to call, being her the one who calls Trump and Netanyahu to be congratulated. But that's the thing. I do think he's more of you could go with any outcome, but that also explains and that also highlights the risk that he also could be fine with Rubio. There's another thing. I don't remember if we talked about it last time, but I always bring this because I think I have to stress this enough. There's this paper by a Miami think tank called the Miami Institute for Intelligence Studies, which looks like a spook outfit. It's run by Jesus Romero, who also has all the elements of being a very well-ingrained spook. He was part of the South Task Force, which is like the interagency entity that dealt with crime and drug-related issues. He's retired now, but he also worked for Booz Allen Hamilton and whatnot. So it really brings like the spooky-ish kind of character. He did this analysis, a this is why I stress this all the time. I'm able to a very short analysis, very, very short, regarding the state of Venezuelan anti-defenses. And it's pretty much obfuscating information because it's based on papers and whatnot from 2020. It's outdated information. But he has a one money quote there that says that basically already considering the state, according to that paper, of the Venezuelan anti-air defenses, that a military strikes supporting an insurgency inside Venezuela would be successful all over the country but Caracas. So that simple, very, very short sentence kind of makes you think this is what he gave Trump to guarantee, the slam dunk situation. And that maybe allow the whole situation to develop into this direction.
What is the attitude towards Maria Corina Machado? She was like the shadow candidate in the 2024 elections in opposition to Maduro. She's U.S. backed. She called on Israel to invade Venezuela and liberate the country from President Maduro. She lost the election. She did receive a sizable chunk of the vote, though, I will say that. But they probably paid for a lot of those votes. But when you look at her, I oftentimes heard her described the new Nobel Peace Prize laureate. I've often heard her described as someone that was so crazy that even all the other opposition candidates and parties don't like her. Like she's some lunatic. So what do people think about her in Venezuela?
It's funny, you haven't seen any kind of, street celebration or whatever. It's all social media stuff, There's no one actually care that much other than perhaps her staunch supporters, which are not that as many as you say. And people just don't take her seriously enough. And I don't think they take the Nobel Prize either as seriously as it was expected to. Actually, she didn't have the good numbers recently regarding popularity. A lot of people also fail, which is usually the opposition cycle, the extreme opposition cycle, which high expectations follow a higher a higher
reality.
Yeah, reality check. Thank you. Which actually, brings morale one more time down, and they actually start pointing and denouncing. You fooled me. You told me this was going to be easy. This was going to happen, and nothing happened. And she was quite in the middle of that cycle right now. So, yeah, I mean, it's no one is actually taken serious, and many people also see through it, as in she has been awarded basically because it gives her a drive, a push, and it also complements. It's like the liberal aspect, liberal complementary aspect of Trump's agenda, which is basically the agenda that was rewarded, the Rubio agenda in that sense. And yeah, on the political spectrum, she's well known because of her cockiness and her aggressiveness, and you know, ruling everyone out because of being collaborators with the government, and even go even further. I mean, these are the extreme factions that even put a lot of heat. I guess they put even more heat to the opposition than even to the government, as in blackmailing them, threatening with sanctions and whatnot, because many of these sections of the rational legal opposition basically knew 5-6 years ago that they were basically losing all of their political capital, and the only way to keep in politics in a coherent way was basically, you know, just accepting the actual rules and play by the rules and be recognized as such. And that's the worst thing that could happen to her. So because any rational scenario in which politics actually prevail above anti-politics and violence, it's the worst thing that could happen to her.
And about 2 weeks before she was given that Nobel Peace Prize, which, by the way, I find it very interesting, Marco Rubio, he screwed over Trump because secretly he wrote a letter of endorsement with Tim Scott, advocating for her to get the prize instead of Trump. But 2 weeks before, or roughly 2 weeks, she was caught trying to do some sort of a terror attack in Caracas. She was planning this at the U.S. Embassy. Is that true?
Yes, there was a false flag attempt, it seems. They were trying to do anything, some sort of attack in order to, you know, make everything, to accelerate everything. And also, mind you, when I mentioned this report by this spooky-ish think tank, it was done like a week after one of these major terrorist plots were foiled, and where usually there are many of her operatives involved, along with, you know, with mercenaries and criminal structures, and with Albanian drug cartels that are based in Ecuador. So that also kind of, you know, makes a lot, in hindsight, it makes a lot of sense of what they were actually thinking of. And yes, I remember that the letter. I think also Walter, wasn't it also involved with that letter to the Nobel Committee? And it also, the surge in Polymarket, like a day before the awards, also said that there was all this insider trading going on, and there are even lawsuits going on regarding her award. I find that also amusing, and I hope it gives her a hard time. I hope the legal aspect of this delays it or cancels it or whatever. I don't know what's going to happen, but also, you know, Jackson, it's quite coherent with the first the view of the Norwegian parliamentarians who actually have like the mandate to decide who wins the Nobel Prize, but just follow the track of the latest 5-6 awarded before Maria Corina. They're all the same. They're all the same kind of lab-made regime change leaders that are very much ingrained in the regime change complex, industrial complex worldview.
Yeah, they're all like U.S.-backed opposition, Belarus, Georgia, Venezuela now, and then, of course, not too many years ago, Obama. But they probably all went to the same school. They're probably all in Skull and Bones together or something, the secret societies.
Yeah.
When one thing that's really been, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know if this should be more concerning or less concerning. My gut tells me less concerning, but this is the U.S. empire we're talking about. You now have threats, like actual military threats against the Colombian president, President Petro, and threats against their sovereignty, military threats. Also happens to be a country whose president stands with Palestine, like Venezuela. And then today, I got a message from a friend in Nicaragua. They're now threatening 100% tariffs on Nicaragua. So a very poor country compared to Colombia and Venezuela now being threatened with economic warfare. Is this some grand plan for a complete U.S. takeover, turn every country into Argentina? Or do you think this is now turning in more of a diplomacy game and threats by Trump?
Oh no, I think one more time, more than Trump, we have to one more time think about Rubio, who really wants to see himself like to some sort of like the great regime changer in chief or something, especially regarding the region. And it also, he has written about this. There's a very interesting piece, I think it's from late 2023 regarding Latin America, which is quite useful to go and check out. I don't know if it's 2023 or 2024, but he basically outlines who are the friends and who are the foes, and how basically he wants to focus on which is basically the coalition, the kind of failed coalition of the willing he was trying to set up regarding Venezuela. And on the other side, of course, us, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Brazil, and Colombia, to the extent that Petro is the current ruler, the current president. And so I do think it has to do with this game theory, domino effect approach, because focusing firstly on Venezuela, you can clearly see that also Rubio is thinking in Cuba, Venezuela being the strongest link of the troika of tyranny, to quote those happy words by John Bolton. And but if you also see the current extrajudicial killings, the attacks on small boats, small fishing boats that we call peñeros here in Venezuela, they're now aiming others, like you see, and like it's been already denounced in several forums and by President Petro himself. Not only Colombians, but also Trinitarians, which is makes you think that it's becoming more than a Venezuelan issue, a Caribbean one. And it's quite dangerous in the sense that it clearly seems to, yes, of course, the flashpoints would be trying to regime change to overthrow Petro, for example, with the help of the powers that be that still operate inside Colombia, regime change Venezuela, but then go further and reshape the region, and making it like Argentina currently is, which is basically a black rock colony right now. So, and of course, which is not a minor aspect you said at the beginning, which is also Israeli friendly. Also, trying to expel the support, the different degrees of support that the Latin America has for Palestine right now, or denouncing, which is not necessarily the same thing, denouncing the genocide at the International Justice Court, Court of Justice.
Yeah, it wasn't crazy enough that they were, the Trump administration, claiming to target in these airstrikes Venezuelan drug smugglers. Then they target Colombian fishermen, then fishermen from Trinidad and Tobago, I believe. And then they got caught red-handed because the Trinidadian government called them out, the media called them out, and then they upload a photo. The State Department, I believe, uploaded a photo. They said, "This is the drug smuggling boat that we struck. It's complete." And they uploaded the back of the photo, and Community Notes fact-checked the post and said, "This is actually a photo of a ship smuggling drugs from 2018 in Ecuador." It's
amazing.
It's insane.
I think they don't care. I think they just don't care. It's not even a post-truth thing, which is, it's a very debatable concept. I think they just basically don't care much about the reasons. They don't care about the truth. This is the Teddy Rooseveltian approach to the region now. It has, I think it's a rhyming, a historical rhyme regarding this. Even it kind of resembles, the antebellum U.S. as in the filibusters, and the expeditionary punishing of the region during those days. So in that sense, it's pretty descriptive, I might think, and also tells you about two things. First, it's the inability of reinventing themselves, and also the state of denial regarding their place in the world right now. And there's another thing, Jackson, I guess you already know this, but the scoop a week ago by Politico saying that there's going to be like a major review of the national defense strategy, which is going to focus mostly on the home front. And I think the home front, it's twofold. Home front means, of course, the obvious. We're already seeing it with the Antifa declaration of, almost basically narco-terrorists, them as well. But also, we are part of the home front, according to that worldview. We are part of domestic politics. And it's interesting also what it tells you about how they need to regather the strength and the control of the hemisphere in order to be able to like face the Asian century.
Diego Sequera, thank you so much for joining me. I hope nothing but the best for the Venezuelan people. I mean, Venezuela is a beautiful country, strong leader, that's true, but a God-fearing country, very Christian, pro-Second Amendment, as we say in the U.S., but for some reason, the U.S. wants to destroy that and continue supporting the country that spits on Christians and murders babies every single day. So I'm hoping for the best, but reality is hitting hard and it's beginning to look very scary. Where can people follow along with your work to stay up to date with what is going on in the region?
Yeah, I've been jumping around, giving interviews everywhere now, and well, usual places, Al Mayadin, Press, RT, etc. And but also, most importantly, follow Misión Verdad, misionverdad.com, and also our Telegram channel. There's always good updates there, and actually, that's where the team does the best of the work. I'm the bomb of the team; they're the good ones. So there's going to be always a good guarantee of good work, and also, almost real-time analysis of what's going on.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.